My name is Grace. I am 25 years old, and I live in a large estate overlooking the country club. I stood in the silence of my home office and stared at the large security monitor on the wall. The camera showed the front gate clearly. Two people were standing there. They looked desperate. I zoomed in on their faces. I knew them better than anyone. I saw the fear in their eyes. I saw the way their designer clothes hung loosely on their bodies. They had a cheap, dusty rental car parked behind them. My mother, Margaret, was wringing her hands. My father just stared at the pavement. 7 years ago, on my 18th birthday, these two people threw me out of our house. They called me a mistake. They handed me a backpack and told me I was worthless. I left with $47 to my name and nowhere to go. My head of security, David, spoke through the intercom system. His voice was calm. "Ma'am," he said, "they are insisting it is an emergency. They say they have lost everything. Do you want me to remove them?" I watched my mother on the screen. She looked so small now. I finally smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was precise. I had waited exactly 7 years for this specific moment. "No, David," I said. "Open the gate. They have no idea who lives here." But before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe, drop a comment. Where are you watching from? My name is Grace. I am 25 years old. I remember the morning of my 18th birthday vividly. It was a Tuesday. The sky was a pale, washed-out blue, and the air had a crisp bite to it. I woke up feeling a flutter of excitement in my chest. It wasn't just about the cake or the presents. It was about the future. For years, I had done everything right. I had a 4 GPA. I was captain of the debate team. I volunteered at the local animal shelter on weekends. I did all of this because I had a plan, and my parents had promised to support it. We had discussed it 1,000 times at the dinner table. I was going to State University. I was going to study business. My parents had told me, since I was a little girl, that they had a college fund set aside for me. They said if I did my part, they would do theirs. I did my part. I held up my end of the bargain. That morning, I walked into the kitchen expecting pancakes. That was our tradition. But the kitchen was empty. The counters were clean. There was no smell of bacon, no balloons, no card on the table, just the hum of the refrigerator. "Mom," I called out. "Dad," my mother, Margaret, walked in from the living room. She was dressed in her yoga clothes, looking perfectly put together. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail. She didn't look at me. She went straight to the coffee maker. "Happy birthday," she said. Her voice was flat. It sounded like she was reading a grocery list. "Thanks," I said, trying to keep my smile. "Is Dad up?" "He's in the study." She poured her coffee. "We need to talk to you tonight. Be home by 6 sharp. Don't make plans with your friends." I nodded, feeling a knot form in my stomach. "Okay, is it about college? Did the acceptance packet come?" She paused, the mug halfway to her lips. She looked at me then, really looked at me. Her eyes were cold. There was no warmth, no motherly affection. Just a strange, hard look I couldn't understand. "Just be home at 6, Grace," she said. "I spent the day at school in a daze. My friends wished me happy birthday. Megan, my best friend since kindergarten, gave me a charm bracelet." I tried to act happy, but the knot in my stomach grew tighter. Something was wrong. The air in my house had felt heavy for weeks, but I had ignored it. I thought it was stress about money, or maybe my dad's job. At 5:55 p.m., I walked through the front door. The house was silent, too silent. I walked into the living room. My father was sitting in his leather armchair, staring into a black coffee mug. He didn't look up when I entered. My mother was standing by the fireplace. And there, in the center of the room, was a suitcase. It wasn't a new set of luggage for college. It was my old duffel bag from summer camp and 2 trash bags filled with clothes. My heart stopped. "What's this?" I asked. My voice shook. Margaret took a step forward. She didn't offer me a seat. She stood tall, her arms crossed over her chest. "You're 18 today," she said. "I know," I said. "Is we going somewhere?" "You are," she said. "We aren't," I looked at my father. "Dad," he shifted in his chair but didn't speak. He looked cowardly. That was the first time I ever saw him as a coward. He couldn't even meet my eyes. "Grace," my mother said, her voice sharp. "We've done our duty. We kept you fed and clothed until you were an adult. That legal obligation ends today." I laughed nervously. I thought it was a joke. A terrible, sick joke. "Mom, what are you talking about? What about college?" "The fund? There is no fund," she said. The room spun. "What you said?" "We spent it," she interrupted. She gestured toward the kitchen. "The renovation, the granite countertops, the new appliances, that was your fund. We decided we wanted to enjoy our home more than we wanted to pay for you to go away. But, how am I supposed to go to school? I stammered. You aren't, she said. Not on our dime. And not from this house. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a piece of folded paper. She threw it on the floor at my feet. It was a birth certificate, but it looked different. Read it, she commanded. I picked it up. My hands were trembling so bad the paper rattled. I looked at the father's name. It wasn't my dad's name, it was unknown. You were a mistake, Margaret said. The words hit me like physical blows. An affair I had 18 years ago. Your father, my husband, agreed to raise you to keep up appearances. We agreed that the moment you turned 18, the contract was up. We don't want to look at you anymore. You remind us of a time we want to forget. I looked at my dad again. Dad, is this true? Please tell me she's lying. He finally looked up. His eyes were red, but not from tears, from exhaustion, from weakness. You should go, Grace, he whispered. Go where? I screamed. Tears were streaming down my face now. I have nowhere to go. I have no money. I have nothing. Margaret walked over to the table by the door. She picked up her purse, pulled out a few bills, and walked over to me. She shoved the money into my hand. Here, she said. $47, that's what I have in cash, take it. I don't want your money, I sobbed. I want my parents. We aren't your parents, she hissed. She grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. She dragged me toward the door. Get your bags, get out. If you're not off the property in 5 minutes, I'm calling the police and telling them there's a trespasser. I grabbed the duffel bag. I grabbed the trash bags. I was crying so hard I couldn't breathe. I stumbled out onto the front porch. The door slammed shut behind me. Then, the loud, mechanical click of the deadbolt. I stood there for a moment, staring at the wood grain of the door. I knocked. Then I pounded. Please, I screamed. Mom, Dad. Please don't do this. The porch light flicked off. I was alone in the dark. I looked down at my hand. I was clutching the crumpled bills. $47. I had $47, a bag of old clothes, and a heart that had just been ripped out of my chest. I walked down the driveway, my legs feeling like lead. I turned back once to look at the house. I saw the curtain move in the living room window. Margaret was watching to make sure I left. I got into my old sedan, a beat-up car I had bought with money from babysitting. It was the only thing I legally owned. I threw my bags in the back seat. I sat in the driver's seat and screamed until my throat bled. Then I started the engine and drove away. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't be there. I spent the first night in a Walmart parking lot. I reclined the driver's seat and tried to sleep, but every noise made me jump. I kept checking my phone, praying for a text. Come home, it was a mistake, we're sorry, the text never came. The next morning the reality set in. I needed a shower, I needed food, I needed a plan. I drove to the coffee shop where I worked part-time after school. I thought, at least I have a job. I can pick up more shifts. I can save up for an apartment. I walked in through the back door, trying to smooth out my wrinkled shirt. My boss, Mr. Henderson, was waiting for me by the time clock. He looked uncomfortable. Grace, he said, can I talk to you? Sure, I said, forcing a smile. Actually, I was hoping to pick up some extra hours if I have to let you go, he said. I froze. What? Why? I've never been late. I'm your best barista. Your mother called, he said. He wouldn't look me in the eye. She told me about the incident. What incident? She said you stole from them, he said quietly. She said you were on drugs. She said you were unstable. Grace, we handle cash here. I can't have that risk. She's lying, I shouted. Mr. Henderson, you know me. I've worked here for 2 years. She kicked me out. She's trying to ruin me. I'm sorry, Grace, he said, turning his back. Please leave your apron. I walked out of the shop, stunned. She wasn't satisfied with kicking me out. She wanted to destroy me. I drove to my Aunt Jennifer's house. She was my mom's sister, but she had always been kind to me. She used to sneak me candy when I was little. Surely she would help. I knocked on her door. I saw her shadow through the frosted glass. She opened the door just a crack, keeping the chain lock on. Aunt Jen, I said, please, I have nowhere to go. You can't be here, Grace, she whispered. She looked terrified. Why, Mom kicked me out. She lied to my boss. Please, I just need a couch for a few nights. Margaret told me everything, Jennifer said. She said if I help you, she'll sue me for the money I borrowed from her last year. She said she'll ruin me too. But that's crazy, I cried. Your family. I have kids to protect, Grace, she said. And then she closed the door. I was toxic. My mother had painted a target on my back, and everyone was afraid to get close to the blast zone. I called Megan, my best friend, the girl who gave me the charm bracelet just 24 hours ago. It went to voicemail. I texted her, "Please help, I'm in my car." An hour later, I got a reply, "My mom spoke to your mom. I can't believe you stole from them after everything they did for you. Don't contact me again. I don't want to be involved with a junkie." I stared at the screen. Junkie. I had never even smoked a cigarette. The lies were spreading faster than I could run. The final blow came 2 weeks later. I was running out of gas money. I had spent most of my $47 on cheap food and a gym membership just so I could use the showers. But then my card got declined at the gym. My parents had canceled the joint account. I went to a gas station to wash up in the bathroom sink. It was gross. The floor was sticky. I was trying to wash my hair in the sink with hand soap. I felt pathetic. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from social media. My ex-boyfriend, Tyler. We had broken up a month ago, but we were still civil. He had posted a photo. It was a picture of me taken through the window of the gas station. You could see me bent over the sink, hair wet, looking homeless and desperate. The caption read, "Dodged a bullet. Crazy really does run in the family. Number psycho." The comments were filled with people I went to school with, laughing emojis, people calling me trash, people saying they always knew. I sat on the curb outside the gas station and threw up. I blocked everyone. I deleted the apps. I realized then that my old life wasn't just gone, it was dead, and they were dancing on its grave. A few days later, I drove past my old house. I know I shouldn't have, but I couldn't help it. I parked down the street and watched. I saw a girl walking out of the front door. She looked about my age. She was wearing my favorite cream-colored sweater, the one I had left behind in the rush. She walked to my dad's car, the car I used to drive, and he smiled at her. He handed her the keys. Margaret walked out and hugged her. It was a warm, tight hug, the kind of hug she never gave me. I later learned her name was Rebecca. She was a foster child they had taken in. They told the church and the community they were saving a poor girl to fill the empty nest. They replaced me. They literally replaced me. They gave her my room, my clothes, my car, my parents. I watched them drive away, a happy family. I was a ghost. I rolled up my window and drove until the house was just a speck in the rearview mirror. That was the moment I stopped being their daughter. I was just a survivor now. By February, I was a shell of a person. I had been living in my car for 4 months. I had learned the rhythm of homelessness. Park in hospital lots, security is usually too busy to check. Rotate locations so you don't get noticed. Sleep with one eye open. I was thin. My clothes hung off me. My hair was brittle. I was always hungry. A deep, gnawing hunger that never went away. Then the ice storm hit. It was a freak storm. The temperature dropped to 5 degrees below zero. The wind howled like a banshee. I was parked behind an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. I had wrapped myself in 2 old blankets I found at a Goodwill bin. I turned the key to start the car and run the heater for a bit. Click, nothing. I tried again, click, click, the battery was dead. The cold had killed it. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in my chest. Without the engine, the car was just a metal freezer. The temperature inside dropped rapidly. I could see my breath in thick white clouds. I curled into a ball, pulling the blankets over my head. I tucked my hands into my armpits to keep them warm. My feet were blocks of ice. I couldn't feel my toes. The shivering started. Violent, uncontrollable shaking that made my teeth chatter so hard I thought they would crack. I lay there in the dark and the thoughts came. The dark thoughts. Maybe Margaret was right, the voice in my head whispered. Maybe you are a mistake. Maybe you are worthless. Look at you. You're dying in a car behind a warehouse and nobody knows. Nobody cares. It would be so easy to just go to sleep. To stop fighting. The cold was making me drowsy. The pain was fading into a dull numbness. I closed my eyes. I saw my parents laughing with Rebecca. I saw my friends mocking me. I saw the empty space where my future used to be. Just let go, Grace, I thought, just let go. But then a spark of anger flared in my chest. It was small, but it was hot. If I died here, they won. If I died here, Margaret would play the grieving mother. She would cry at my funeral. She would tell everyone how troubled I was, how she tried to save me. She would use my death to get more sympathy. No, I sat up. The movement was agonizing. My joints were stiff. No, I said out loud. My voice was a croak. I will not give her the satisfaction. I was not a mistake. I was not worthless. I was Grace. And I was going to live. I forced myself to move. I rubbed my arms. I did tiny crunches in the seat to generate body heat. I fought the sleep. I fought the cold. I fought the ghost of my mother telling me to give up. I stayed awake all night. I focused on hate. Hate is a powerful fuel when you have nothing else. I hated them enough to stay alive. When the sun finally rose, the storm had passed. The world was covered in white ice, beautiful and deadly. I knew I couldn't stay in the car. I would freeze to death tonight if I didn't find warmth. I grabbed my backpack. I left the car. I left the trash bags of clothes. I just took what I could carry. I walked. My boots were thin, and the ice crunched under my feet. The wind cut through my jacket. I walked for 3 miles toward the only lights I saw on the highway. It was a diner, Sarah's 24-hour eats. The neon sign was buzzing. I stood outside the glass door. I saw my reflection. I looked like a monster. My face was gray, my eyes sunken, my lips blue. I smelled like stale sweat and fear. I almost turned away. I didn't have money. I had $3 and change left, but the warmth radiating from the glass was calling me. I pushed the door open. A little bell chimed. The heat hit me like a physical wall. It was glorious. I almost fell to my knees. The diner was mostly empty, just a few truckers at the counter and an old man in a booth. A woman was behind the counter. She was in her 50s with messy red hair and a stained apron. Her name tag said Sarah. She looked up. She saw me. I waited for her to yell. I waited for her to tell me to get out. To say restrooms were for customers only, she didn't. She walked out from behind the counter. She walked right up to me. She looked at my blue lips. She looked at my shaking hands. "Honey," she said. Her voice was like gravel and honey. "You look like you went 12 rounds with a polar bear." I have $3, I stammered. "Can I just sit for a coffee?" "Put your money away," she said sternly. She guided me to a booth in the back near the heater. "Sit. Don't move." She disappeared into the kitchen. She came back 2 minutes later with a bowl of potato soup, a grilled cheese sandwich, and a mug of hot chocolate with whipped cream. "Eat," she ordered. I ate. I ate like an animal. I didn't care about manners. The hot soup warmed me from the inside out. It was the best thing I had ever tasted. Tears dripped into the bowl, but I kept eating. When I was done, Sarah came back. She put a key on the table. "There's a shower in the employee bathroom in the back," she said. "There's a uniform in the locker. It'll be big on you, but it's clean. Go wash up." I looked at her stunned. "Why?" "Because I've been there," she said simply. "Now go." Before I changed my mind, I showered. The hot water felt like a miracle. I scrubbed the dirt and the shame off my skin. I put on the oversized pink uniform. I looked ridiculous, but I felt human again. When I came out, Sarah was pouring coffee for the old man in the booth. "You know how to work a register?" she asked me without looking up. "Yes," I said. "Good, you start now. Pay is under the table, cash at the end of every shift. You can sleep in the storage room on the cot until you get on your feet, but you work hard. I don't tolerate laziness." "I'll work hard," I promised. "I'll work harder than anyone." And I did. For 3 months, I lived in that diner. I waited tables, I scrubbed floors, I organized the pantry. I saved every penny. There was a regular customer named Marcus Harrison. He came in every morning at 6 a.m. He always ordered black coffee and dry toast. He was always on his laptop, looking stressed. He wore expensive suits that looked out of place in the greasy spoon. I never bothered him. I just kept his coffee full. One morning, the diner was slammed. Sarah was cooking, and the other waitress had called in sick. I was running the floor alone. I was taking orders, bussing tables, and cashing people out. I was moving like a machine. I had memorized the orders. I anticipated needs before people asked. I dropped the check at Marcus's table. He didn't look at his computer, he looked at me. "You're efficient," he said. "Just doing my job, sir," I said. "No," he said. "Most people just do the job, you're optimizing it. I watched you. You grouped your trips to the kitchen to save steps. You memorized 4 orders at once to save writing time. You're processing data in real time." I paused. "It's just waitress math." "It's logic," he said. He closed his laptop. "I have a startup. We're drowning in logistics. I have a dozen guys with Ivy League degrees who can't organize a lunch order, let alone a database. You have something they don't." "What's that?" I asked. "Hunger," he said. "And I don't mean for food. I mean you have something to prove." He pulled a business card out of his pocket and slid it across the table. "I need an assistant, someone who can organize chaos. It pays double what you make here. Plus benefits." I looked at the card, Harrison Tech. "I don't have a degree," I said. "I don't even have a permanent address." "I don't care," Marcus said. I care that you didn't let that coffee pot get empty once in 2 hours during a rush. Be at my office Monday at 8 a.m. He left $100 tip and walked out. I held the card in my hand. It felt heavy. It felt like a key. Sarah walked up behind me and looked at the card. She squeezed my shoulder. "Fly, little bird," she whispered. That was the beginning. That was the moment the victim died and the fighter was born. I walked into the Harrison Tech building on a Monday morning. I was wearing a black pantsuit I had bought at a thrift store for $12. It was a little too big in the shoulders, but I had pinned it on the inside so it wouldn't look sloppy. The office was nothing like the diner. It was made of glass and steel. It smelled like expensive cologne and ozone. Everyone walked fast. Everyone looked important. Most of the employees were men in their 20s. They wore vests and rolled up their sleeves. They talked about synergy and deliverables. They had degrees from schools I could never afford to visit, let alone attend. They looked at me like I was the cleaning lady. I didn't mind. I was used to being invisible. Marcus didn't treat me like invisible, though. He pointed to a desk right outside his glass office. "Sit there," he said. "Don't let anyone in unless they have an appointment. And organize this mess." He pointed to a digital folder of contracts and schedules that was a disaster. I got to work. I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't take lunch breaks. I ate an apple at my desk and kept typing. I treated the data like I treated the dinner rush at Sarah's. Everything had a place. Everything had a flow. If something blocked the flow, I fixed it. 3 weeks later, I was in a meeting. I wasn't supposed to speak. I was just there to take notes. Marcus was arguing with his lead developers. They were trying to build a scheduling system for hospitals, but it kept crashing. The nurses hated it. "The logic is sound," one developer yelled. "The nurses just aren't using it right." "If the user can't use it, the product is broken," Marcus snapped. He rubbed his temples. "We are losing clients." I looked at the whiteboard. I saw the problem immediately. It wasn't the code. It was the human element. They were scheduling nurses like robots, not people with families. I cleared my throat. The room went silent. The developer looked at me with annoyance. "You have something to say, assistant?" he sneered. "Yes," I said. My voice was steady. "You have the shift changes set for 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., but the bus schedules in the city don't align with that. The nurses are late because of public transit, not because they are lazy. And you don't allow swapping shifts without manager approval, which takes 2 days. If a kid gets sick, they just call out. You need a peer-to-peer swap system." Marcus looked at me. "Draw it." I stood up. I walked to the whiteboard. I grabbed a red marker. I drew a simple flow chart. It was the same system I used in my head to manage tables at the diner. You don't ask the manager for everything. You rely on your team. "Build this," Marcus told the developers. They grumbled, but they did it. 2 months later, the software launched. It was called ShiftEasy. It was a hit. Hospitals loved it. Nurses loved it. Marcus called me into his office. He poured 2 glasses of whiskey. It was 2 p.m. "You saved the contract," he said. "How did you know that?" "I know what it's like to take the bus," I said, "and I know what it's like to be afraid of losing a shift." "I want to make you a project manager," he said. "I'm giving you a raise, $80,000 a year." I stared at him. 80,000. That was more money than my father made. "I don't want to be a project manager," I said. He raised an eyebrow. "What do you want?" "I want to build my own app," I said. "I have an idea, but I don't know how to code." "I'll pay for your classes," Marcus said, "but you stay on my payroll until you launch." "Deal, deal." For the next year, I didn't sleep much. I worked for Marcus during the day. At night, I sat in the back of Sarah's diner with my laptop. I watched YouTube tutorials. I read textbooks I bought used online. I learned Python. I learned Java. I learned how to build a world out of zeros and ones. I built an app called MediShift. It was specifically for freelance nurses and caregivers. It connected them directly to patients who needed home care, cutting out the expensive agencies. It put the money in the workers' pockets, not the middlemen. I launched it quietly. The first week, we had 50 downloads. The second month, we had 5,000. By the 6th month, we hit 100,000 downloads. The money started coming in. Real money. I remember looking at my bank account on my phone. It said, $1,045,320. I was sitting in the diner when I saw it. Sarah poured me a refill. "Good news?" she asked. "I'm a millionaire, Sarah," I whispered. She didn't gasp. She just smiled and wiped the counter. About time, you paying for your coffee today then. I'm buying the building, I said, and I'm giving it to you. And I did. But I didn't buy a fancy car, I didn't buy designer clothes. I stayed in my small apartment. I kept my head down, I kept working. I started hiring people for my company. I didn't look at Ivy League degrees. I looked for the people everyone else ignored. I hired a single mom who had a gap in her resume because she couldn't afford childcare. She became my head of HR. I hired a guy who had been to prison for a nonviolent offense and couldn't get a job anywhere else. He was a brilliant coder. He became my CTO. I hired foster kids who were aging out of the system. They called my office the island of misfit toys. I called it the strongest team in the city. We were hungry. We were loyal. And we were winning. I had money now, but I didn't have answers. The question that haunted me every night was, why? Why did my mother hate me so much? Why did my father stand by and watch? Was I really just a mistake? I decided to find out. I hired a private investigator named Frank. He was an ex-cop who drank too much coffee and didn't ask questions. I wrote him a check for $10,000. Find out everything, I told him. Dig until your shovel breaks. 2 weeks later, Frank walked into my office. He placed a thick manila folder on my desk. He looked serious. You're not going to like this, Grace, he said. I opened the folder. The first page was a copy of my grandmother's will. My mother's mother. She had died 3 years ago. Read the highlighted section, Frank said. I read it. To my granddaughter, Grace, I leave the entirety of my estate, valued at $4 million. However, this trust is to remain secret until her 21st birthday to ensure she develops character. If, for any reason, she is abandoned or removed from the family home prior to age 21, the trust activates immediately, provided she can prove she is self-sufficient. My hands shook. She left me everything. Keep reading, Frank said. Look at the bank transfers. I flipped the page. There were records of withdrawals, hundreds of thousands of dollars. Your mother, Margaret, had power of attorney over your grandmother in her final years, Frank explained. She was draining the accounts. She stole about $400,000 before your grandmother died. She knew that when the will was read, you would get the rest, and an audit would expose her theft. I felt sick. So she kicked me out. To hide the crime, Frank said. If you were gone, if you were a runaway or a drug addict who couldn't be found, she could challenge the will. She could claim you were unfit. She's been living off your money, Grace. The kitchen renovation, your money, the cars, your money, the new daughter. Rebecca, I said. Yeah, Rebecca. Frank pulled out a photo. It was a picture of Rebecca, the girl who replaced me. She looked terrified in the photo. She had a bruise on her arm. I tracked her down. She's not doing well. She wants to talk to you. I met Rebecca at a park. She was 19 now. She looked thin and tired. She was wearing a coat that used to be mine. When she saw me, she started crying. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I'm so sorry, Grace. It's not your fault, I said. I sat beside her on the bench. Tell me what's happening. They're monsters, she whispered. At first it was great. They bought me things. They took photos for Facebook. They told everyone how they saved me. But as soon as the likes stopped coming, Margaret changed. She started hitting you, I asked. Rebecca nodded. She pulled up her sleeve. There were fresh bruises. She says I'm ungrateful. She says I eat too much. She makes me sleep in the basement now because she wants to turn my room into a guest suite. And your dad? He just watches TV. He turns up the volume so he doesn't hear the yelling. Rage. Pure, cold rage filled my veins. It wasn't the hot anger I felt in the ice storm. This was different. This was the anger of a judge delivering a sentence. They didn't just replace me, I said. They are using you. Just like they used me. They're broke, Grace, Rebecca said. Margaret spent all the money. She got involved in some crypto investment scheme. They're terrified. They're taking out loans in my name. I took Rebecca's hand. Pack your bags, I said. Tonight, leave the window open. I'm getting you out. Where will I go? She asked. You're coming with me, I said. I have a big house, and I have a really good lawyer. I got Rebecca out that night. I set her up in a guest room in my new apartment. I got her a therapist. I hired a lawyer to clear her credit history and file for emancipation and damages against my parents. But I wasn't done with Margaret and my father. My company, MediShift, was valued at $200 million. I had investors lining up. I had cash. Liquid cash. I called my financial advisor. Who holds the mortgage on 42 Oak Creek Lane? I asked. That was my parents' address. It's a bundle of distressed assets held by a smaller lender, Sun Valley Finance, he said. Buy Sun Valley Finance, I said. The whole company. The whole company, today. Grace, that's a bad asset. They have too much bad debt. I don't care about the debt, I said. I care about the paper, buy it. By Friday, I owned the mortgage on my childhood home. I looked at the files. My parents hadn't paid their mortgage in 6 months. They were drowning. They had applied for an extension. I approved it. I let them think they were safe. I wanted them to feel comfortable. I wanted them to think they had gotten away with it. Then, I watched their crypto scam collapse. Frank kept me updated. The investment Margaret had poured everything into, including the money she stole from the grandmother, went to zero overnight. They were desperate. They started selling things. The furniture, the jewelry. Then, the country club membership. I knew my mother loved that country club. It was her symbol of status. She had spent her whole life trying to be accepted by the rich women there. They had rejected her for years, but she kept trying. The estate right above the country club went for sale. It was the biggest house on the hill. It looked down on the golf course. It looked down on everyone. I bought it. I paid in cash. I moved in. I hired security. I installed the cameras. Then, I made my move on the parents. I instructed my team at the mortgage company to call in the loan. No more extensions. Immediate repayment of the full principal or foreclosure within 24 hours. They didn't have the money. Obviously, they were evicted. I didn't go to watch. I didn't need to. I knew what it looked like. The sheriff, the locks changing, the neighbors watching from behind their curtains. The shame. They had nowhere to go. They had burned every bridge. Aunt Jennifer wouldn't help them. She knew the truth now. Their friends at the church had abandoned them when the rumors of abuse surfaced. They were alone. They found out who bought the big house on the hill. They didn't know it was me. They just heard a wealthy investor had moved in, a wealthy investor who was known for philanthropy. They thought they could beg. They thought they could play the victim one last time, so they drove their rental car up my driveway, and I was waiting. Open the gate, I repeated to David. I watched the heavy iron gates swing open. My parents drove their dusty car up the long, winding driveway. They parked next to my Range Rover. They looked at the fountain in the courtyard. They looked at the marble columns. I walked downstairs. I didn't dress up. I wore jeans and a simple black t-shirt. I was barefoot. This was my house. I didn't need to impress anyone. I stood in the doorway. David stood behind me, arms crossed. My mother got out of the car first. She looked old. The 7 years hadn't been kind to her. Her face was lined with stress. Her hair was graying at the roots. She looked up. She saw me. She froze. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. My father got out. He squinted at me. He dropped his keys. Grace, he whispered. Hello, Margaret. Hello, Dad, I said. My voice was calm. It didn't shake. You live here, Margaret stammered. She looked around, confused. But I'm what? I asked. Worthless, a mistake, a drug addict. No, she cried. She immediately switched into her act. Tears filled her eyes instantly. Oh, Grace. My baby, we've been looking for you. We were so worried. She ran toward me, arms open. Don't, I said. I didn't raise my voice. I just held up a hand. She stopped. We missed you so much, she sobbed. We made a mistake. We were stressed. We didn't mean it. We've been praying for you every day. Stop lying, I said. I know about Grandma's money. I know about the theft. I know about Rebecca. Margaret's face went pale. The tears stopped instantly. The mask slipped. You ungrateful brat, she hissed. We gave you life. We put a roof over your head for 18 years. You owe us. I owe you, I laughed. It was a dry sound. Let's talk about debts. I pulled a piece of paper from my pocket. I bought your mortgage, I said. I'm the one who foreclosed on you, my father gasped. You did this to us. Yes, I said. And I have the police report from Rebecca. She's safe, by the way. She lives in the east wing of this house. She's going to college next year. I'm paying for it. You stole our daughter, Margaret screamed. I saved her from you, I corrected. We are destitute, my father shouted. He looked angry now. We have nothing, you have all this. This palace, you have to help us. It's the law, it's moral. Moral, I asked. You threw me into an ice storm. You let people believe I was a junkie. You destroyed my reputation. You stole my inheritance. We are your parents, Margaret shrieked. You can't leave us on the street. I looked at them. I looked at the people who had terrified me for my entire childhood. They looked so small now. They weren't monsters. They were just sad, greedy little people. I'm not going to leave you with nothing, I said. Hope sparked in their eyes. They thought they had won. They thought I was weak. Wait here, I said. I turned and walked to the small table in the entryway. I picked up an envelope. I walked back out. I handed the envelope to my father. He tore it open. His hands were shaking. He pulled out the contents. It was a check. He stared at it. $47. That is exactly what you gave me when you kicked me out, I said. Plus, I adjusted for inflation. So technically I'm being generous. Is this a joke? Margaret screamed. She lunged at me. David stepped forward. He didn't touch her. He just blocked her path. He was 6'4". Margaret stopped. It's not a joke, I said. It's closure. I owe you exactly what you gave me. Nothing more, nothing less. I looked at David. Escort them off the property. If they return, arrest them for trespassing. Grace, my father yelled as David herded them toward their car. Grace, please. Goodbye, I said. I watched them get into their car. I watched them drive away. I watched the gates close behind them. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel happy. I felt light. The weight I had been carrying for 7 years was finally gone. The fallout was swift. With the evidence Frank gathered and Rebecca's testimony, the district attorney filed charges against Margaret for elder abuse and grand theft regarding my grandmother's estate. She didn't have money for a good lawyer. She went to prison for 5 years. My father filed for divorce the day after the confrontation. He tried to save himself. He moved into a cheap motel and got a job as a night watchman. He sends me letters sometimes. I don't open them. I put them in a box in the attic. I don't hate him anymore. I just don't have space for him in my life. I kept the childhood home. I didn't sell it. I drove there one day with a contractor. We walked through the empty rooms. I stood in the kitchen where my mother told me I was a mistake. I stood in the living room where my father watched me leave. What do you want to do with the place? The contractor asked. Flip it. No, I said. Gut it, tear down the walls, make it bright, make it warm. I turned the house into a transitional shelter. I named it the Lighthouse. It was for girls like Rebecca, girls like me, foster kids who were turning 18 and had nowhere to go. We gave them a room. We gave them job training. We gave them therapy. We gave them a family that wouldn't kick them out. 6 months later, on the opening day, I stood on the front porch, the same porch where I had cried and pounded on the door in the dark. It looked different now. The door was painted a bright, welcoming yellow. There were flowers in the pots. I could hear laughter coming from the kitchen. Rebecca was inside, teaching a new girl how to make pancakes. Sarah was there too. She was running the kitchen. She had sold the diner and came to work for me full-time. She walked out onto the porch and handed me a mug of hot chocolate. You did good, kid, she said. I took a sip. It tasted like safety. They broke me, Sarah, I said quietly, looking at the street where I used to walk alone. Yeah, Sarah said. They broke you, but you didn't stay broken. You rebuilt yourself, and you built yourself stronger. I thought about revenge. For a long time, I thought revenge meant destroying them. I thought it meant watching them suffer. But as I looked at the house filled with safe, happy kids, and then looked up at the hill where my own peaceful home stood, I realized something. Making them suffer didn't fix me. They were already miserable people. They carried their own hell with them wherever they went. My victory wasn't their poverty. My victory was my peace. My victory was that I could love people without hurting them. My victory was that I became the person they said I could never be. I smiled. A real smile this time, warm and genuine. You know what the best revenge is? I asked Sarah. What? Living the life they swore I never would. I turned my back on the street and walked inside the house. I closed the door softly behind me. I was home. If you have ever had to rebuild yourself after someone else tried to break you, I want to hear your story. You are not alone, and you are not worthless. Tell me your victory in the comments below, and please subscribe for more stories about rising from the ashes.